Hello and welcome to Film du Siècle, the film and media channel focused on all things 90s and 2000s. This week, Seb and Olly will be discussing The Truman Show.
Hello and welcome back to Film du Siècle, the film discussion channel starring myself, Seb, and...
Me, Ollie Johnson, how you doing?
Yeah, good man. This heat, it's breaking my balls.
I know,
I'd
didn't
like to
sleep
see
a
that...
wink last night.
Me neither. I would love to see that phrase return as a common parlour in the English language.
What, breaking my balls?
Yeah, because it was in South Park and it was in like loads of old songs, like David Bowie songs and stuff. I just want people to go around saying that today.
Seb, you're breaking my balls here, Seb.
That would please me so much.
Breaking someone's balls would please you.
Well, I'm here to talk about The Truman Show.
Ah.
What a movie. Have you seen it, Ollie? I think you have.
I have, well, sort of. I've never watched it in full, but...
What is it with you and watching, like, bits of movies?
Well, it was one that was shown in English class again, like Holes.
Yes!
And I wasn't there for all of it, so...
So, knowing what you know, what can you piece together?
Well, I know what the premise is, and I know how it ends.
Yeah.
I remember that, basically Jim Carrey has lived his entire life in front of cameras without knowing. Everything about his life is a fabrication.
This is the premise of the movie, by the way. We're not saying that he didn't realise he was an actor the whole time.
Although that is debatable.
Somebody stop me! Wait, why are you filming me? I just put on this mask for a laugh. Why are you filming me?
Yeah, well, everything about his life is made up. It's a TV show. He has no idea, but then he starts to piece it together.
Yes.
And he eventually escapes the big set.
Yeah.
And you see, when he's trying to sail to the end of the set, I suppose, there's people watching him on TV, and there's a guy in the bath that I thought was funny.
Yes, I remember that guy.
I remember that as a kid. I don't know why we were shown this film in English class.
It's a very thought-provoking movie, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the extent to which I remember of it, well, that's it, basically. It does seem like something that would be good to think about. I guess we'll find out when we watch it.
Yeah. Little bit of trivia. Do you know who was originally considered for the role?
Who?
Above Jim Carrey. Robin Williams.
For the role of Jim Carrey.
No, for the role of the character that Jim Carrey plays. Robin Williams.
I can see that. I can see him in a show like... Well, in a movie like this.
It feels like a Robin Williams movie, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But the casting director... Do you know what made him pick Jim Carrey in the end was?
What?
Ace Ventura: Pet Detective.
Interesting.
I know, of all films.
Yeah.
Apparently because Jim Carrey's performance in that reminded him of Charlie Chaplin.
Right.
Okay, I'll take your word for that. Yeah, I love this movie. It's like one of my favourite movies of all time.
Well, that's high praise. I don't know what else I can say about it, but yeah, let's watch it.
And Brian De Palma of the Untouchables fame nearly directed it. And this movie cost $60 million to make, so 2/3 of a Babe 2.
Okay, sorry, my brain went blank for a minute there. Brian De Palma, you said?
Yeah, Brian De Palma.
Who did Untouchables and Scarface.
Yeah. And Scarface, yes, you can't forget about the old Scarface.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can sort of picture it, can't you? Because it's got its serious moments. It's sort. I would describe this movie as manically serious.
I remember flashes of it. I remember the footage of his wedding where the bride has her fingers crossed behind her back.
Yeah.
The guy breaking into his house to offer him beer.
Yes. Right? Yeah, that was his best friend, who was, of course, one of the actors in the end.
Yeah, but he just walks on into his house, like, without knocking.
Yeah.
Or, well, not without knocking. I mean, he didn't let him in. Well, he may or may not have knocked. But the point is, he just went into his house without permission.
Yeah, well, basically, he was instructed to do so. And what I like about this movie is nothing is simple in it. Because you've got his best friend, who's an actor, but you get the feeling that he does genuinely care about Truman, and that their friendship at least is real.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, he ultimately is just doing his job, looking for Truman, for the film crew.
I don't get why it was necessary to have one person that wasn't in on it. I guess we'll find out soon.
Yeah, such a good film, honestly. And it cost $60 million to make, which was 2/3 of Babe 2, funnily enough.
Yeah.
And it made $264.1 million. So it was a big hit in the cinema.
That's good.
Yeah. And funnily enough, it came out in 1998, the same year as Babe 2. So it's interesting that Siskel and Ebert preferred Babes 2 to Jim Carrey's The Truman Show.
That is interesting.
Alright. Yeah, let's put this mother on, and we will get back to you with our in-depth thoughts. And we're back in the room.
Oh, that was good.
Yeah, that was such a good movie.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't see all of it before. I was shown it in English class, like Holes, but I missed the first lesson where he was showing it. So I missed the first 40 minutes or so. I started watching from around the point... Well, the first part I really remember was when he was swinging that stick at those rad workers.
Oh, yes. What were you, some kind of truant? Because this comes up a lot. It's like, I only saw the second half of this movie in English, and I didn't see the first half because I was away.
I didn't like Wednesdays.
You're like Ferris Bueller. That's an 80s movie. We can't watch that, can we?
I was quite a skiver in my school days. It's not that I fabricated reasons to stay off, but I would milk them when they came up.
That explains why I didn't see much of you until sixth form.
Yeah.
Oh, you little brat, you're having the run of the streets. You're going to end up in Borstal at this rate. Sorry, carry on, Artful Dodger. Tell us about this movie that we watched.
I just stayed home and played video games a lot.
Almost as good as an education, isn't it?
Well, I learned from Metal Gear Solid that Rhodesia is now known as Zimbabwe.
Yeah, that's right. It's good with its trivia like that. Oh, tell us about that time when you thought that Solid Snake was alive because he didn't have enough sleep.
Oh, God. Okay, this is completely irrelevant to the Truman Show, but it was a heat wave, so I couldn't sleep, and I was up for like 4 days.
Yeah.
And I was playing Snake Eater, because what else are you supposed to do when you can't sleep?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I just got past the boss fight with the End, the old guy who will die if you wait long enough.
You just wait.
Yeah. And I knew what was going to happen late in the game, and I found myself looking through my phone contacts to try and warn Snake what was going on before I thought for a second and went, what the fuck are you doing, man?
Snake isn't real.
Yeah. I think I might have got up from a micro nap or something, like when you fall asleep for like 6 seconds. And my brain...
I had something the other day like that where I saw that somebody famous was offering guitar lessons and I was like, oh, great. And then I went on Twitter and Instagram to try and find out more details, like contact details. And then I couldn't find any, so I assume I must have dreamt the whole thing.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay.
I gotta say, the Truman Show lends itself well to watching again, at least once, because we watched it yesterday at time of recording. I couldn't get a quiet environment for recording. I looked through parts of it again this morning. I saw the opening again. And seeing the actors talk about the show, knowing who they are in the movie.
Yes!
Like, it's a different feel for me.
Yes, I imagine it is a different feel watching the whole movie this time, but I did like that intro, and not many movies do it, but it's a great way.
No, I mean, seeing the intro after already being familiar with who those characters are.
Yeah, I know what you meant, but what I'm saying is, the intro where they have the cast of The Truman Show and they're interviewing them about what they think about The Truman Show, it's a great way of doing exposition without making it feel that way, and also introducing you to the premise, the plot, what it's all about. I think the only other movie I can think of that does it anywhere near as well is, oddly enough, The Incredibles.
Yeah, the Incredibles is quite good in that respect.
We do this a lot where we compare movies to other movies that aren't even remotely similar, but somehow do a lot of the same stylistic techniques.
Have one thing in common.
Yes.
Like one technique that is used.
But I love the cinematography in this movie. We're going to come to our favourite aspects. I'm going to say straight off it's the cinematography. It's the techniques they use, like how you have the shaky cam and it's actually used right. I think they were going for the same thing in the Hunger Games because a lot of it was on television and there were hidden cameras, so it was a very similar premise in that regard.
If they were trying to do that, I've got to say it didn't come across for me.
No, they overdid it, and the problem is after the Hunger Games, for about a year, everything had a shaky cam because they thought, oh, that's artsy, let's do it. But they missed the part where there was an actual reason they were doing it in the Hunger Games, even though I must say they overdid the effect horribly to the point where you couldn't really tell what was going on half the time. Sometimes that's intentional because it's the heat of the moment and you don't know what's going on.
That calls to mind for me that Roger Ebert quote about Battlefield Earth. He's learned from better films that sometimes directors tilt the camera, but he hasn't learned why.
Exactly. Speaking of Roger Ebert, he preferred Babe Pig in the City to The Truman Show.
I don't see it.
Neither do I. And I think I had a more favourable...
Is that why you wanted us to watch them back to back?
No, it was just a happy accident, just like anything of quality on this show. But another camera technique that they use a lot is they have it point of view shots from the ground or from objects in the kitchen and stuff. So it makes it feel like the main character is being watched, because obviously he is. And we're seeing what the audience at home would be seeing of The Truman Show. And you also have that effect where there's sort of a blurred outline to make it look like it's a hidden camera, like maybe on somebody's person or on their clothing. And it does that really well. There's very few shots that don't look like it could be shot from something, from a hidden camera in this universe.
Yeah, that's true. And one thing I found oddly weird is those twins that accost him every day and push him up against that wall.
Yes, although you noticed something quite interesting. You noticed the reason why they were doing that was to get him in frame better.
Yeah, well, I reasoned that must be why they're doing it.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't think of another reason.
He's grown up with this, so it's probably not unusual to him. Whereas to us, we think, this is not how people treat others. And already in the beginning, we see everyone around him is pushing him into a corner, controlling him.
Yeah, that's true. I did say when we were watching it that if these incidents happen so close together, how has the illusion persisted this long? And that's probably the answer, because he's never known anything different. He doesn't have the frame of reference that we do.
Precisely, and we do get a lot of answers in this film.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything that isn't answered, but it's not done in a boring expositionary way. We just find out information, and because the world building is so interesting, even if they do go a bit information overload, we find that interesting, so it doesn't really bother us. Yeah. And what I like is the main, I suppose you could call him antagonist, Christof, who's created this world of The Truman Show. The first thing he says in the beginning of the movie where they're interviewing him is it's all controlled. I mean, you don't see him for a full hour after that, but that establishes already that is his belief. He really believes that, and that it's possible.
There's obviously the ethical question of, well, it's not really a question. It's not okay to do that to a person.
Yeah, I've actually seen a few takes where people have said, well, it's fairly ambiguous. I'm thinking, no, it's not. Towards the end of the movie, they try to kill him for the sole reason that he wants to be free of the Truman Show.
Yeah, and
it's not ambiguous at all.
I don't think he wants to be free because he feels somehow trapped, although he eventually does. He's always had this sort of wanderlust. And...
It's humanity.
Yeah.
We all do. And you can't suppress that.
Yeah, and obviously, because it's a controlled environment outside of him, no one else has it. So, he must feel lonely that there's no one like him who wants to get out and see places, because why would you want to encourage that in your controlled TV show environment?
Well, precisely, and they do everything they possibly can to discourage it to the point of emotional trauma and abuse.
Short of actually cutting his legs off.
Oh yeah, well, it's actual abuse that's going on, and it doesn't shy away from that.
Oh, the gaslighting his mother and wife to, it made me, physically angry.
Yeah, and it's meant to. It does that very well.
Yeah.
Everybody is irritating in this movie, but in a good way, in a way
that is intentional.
Exactly. Well, Truman isn't, it's fair to say.
It's very good at making you root for him.
Yes, it's also very good at building up mystery, because it gives you enough information when you need it. Like, in the first few minutes, the whole Sylvia Garland mystery is established. Who is she? Yeah. And then we find out more and more details through the movie, to the point where we get a flashback scene. And I love that it is an actual in-show flashback that they put up on the screen in the bar. I like how everything in this movie is not necessarily a meta joke, but a meta reference to the show.
I love the product placement.
It reminds me of Wayne's World.
Yeah.
It's like they'll be having a regular conversation. Like, you should buy one of those new lawnmowers. They're very good and they never break down. And looking at the camera while saying it. And I like how there's a brand of cocoa that apparently Truman drinks. Although the only times we ever see him drink it are A, out of boredom, and B, when it's made for him, whether he's asked for it or not.
Yeah. There's a lot of religious imagery in this movie that I don't quite know what to make of.
Especially towards the end.
Yeah.
The part where Truman has got on the boat, and please, you should know by now, if you haven't seen this movie, watch it before watching this video. But when he's taken the sailboat to reach the edge of the Truman Show dome,
yeah,
there's the storm which keeps battering him, and eventually you think it's got him, but you see him hanging over the edge of the boat with his arms spread out. Yeah. Obvious Jesus symbolism. I don't know why.
Well, I first noticed it when he stepped into the road and put his hand out to the car. And
yes, he parts the cars.
Yeah, and then after that he literally talks to God, in the form of a voice in the sky.
You even get the sort of puffy clouds and the pearly gates and the booming voice.
Yeah.
And one thing that I found fascinating about that scene at the very end, where you finally have the interaction between Christof and Truman, where he is the voice in the sky, is when he speaks into the camera, not the camera, what am I about? The microphone, it's a whisper his end, whereas to Truman it's a loud booming voice, which I think is quite symbolic of how all these small actions that the film crew and Christof as the showrunner are doing that feel small and insignificant to them have a huge impact on Truman and his life.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he doesn't even, strictly speaking, have a life of his own. I mean, his entire world is built to keep him where he is.
And the one time when he decided to pursue a relationship with somebody of his own volition, he was immediately stopped from that.
Yeah.
Because the friend he has, who I think is a fascinating character we're going to talk more about, he's had since childhood, and the wife he has, he sort of had on the rebound, who they were pushing towards him, but he wasn't terribly interested in. He was interested in Natasha McElhone's character.
And that ended when the showrunner decided it must.
Exactly. Because she came there with the purpose of telling him what was going on, and that was the first time we see where he begins to get suspicious of the world around him, or maybe even disenfranchised of the world around him a bit.
I mean, I think there's a lot of uncanny valley in what Truman sees, because people have a way of knowing when something is not quite right.
And I like how that's always in the background, at least, because if you look at the sky, it looks slightly fake. And you can tell the moon's fake, you can tell the sun isn't quite right, and they keep that in there. I don't know how they managed to do that. It's remarkable, because obviously they didn't build a huge dome. So it's remarkable how they managed to get that on film like that.
Yeah.
And I love the shots of the town where you can see it's surrounded by water. You can see a slight curvature in the background as well, in the forest.
The phobia of water that they deliberately gave Truman is a good obstacle for him to overcome. Although we don't actually see him doing that, he's just done it at once.
Yeah, and that's the thing, that's the completion of his character arc, isn't it?
Yeah. But also, the audience of the show didn't see it either. And I want to also bring up that, we know that his wife eventually leaves him, but we never see anything of the process to make that happen. There's just an implied time skip of him feigning complacency to try and... He knows that the showrunners... Well, he doesn't know there are showrunners, but he knows that whoever is controlling his life knows he's onto them. So he sort of plays the part for a bit.
Yeah, he acts like the old him, and the security guards who are watching him say, oh, he's back to his old goofy self. Yeah, and he manages to have them all fooled.
And then he Ferris Bueller's them.
Yes. And I love that scene because it must have been so liberating for him for the first time in his life not being watched and nobody knowing where he is.
And then you've got like something out of a zombie movie, like people just walking around looking for him.
It gets so eerie.
Yeah.
Because whenever he doesn't conform and goes out of what's comfortable to the showrunners, everybody around him just piles in. Like the cars all drive in all of a sudden to stop him going somewhere. A few people on the streets will impede him somehow. And as soon as his dad, which is an interesting subplot, appears, disguised as a homeless man, 3 random people off the street just drag him away just like that, with no explanation.
I don't actually think that's his biological dad either.
No, well, it said that he was an orphan who was adopted by the TV company.
Yeah.
We get that information. So although it's not his real dad, he's obviously developed that emotional connection to him.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that some of the people in that world have. I'm not so sure about his mother, because it's hard to tell with her.
Well,
I say mother in inverted commas, his TV mother. I think that his dad really did want to just return to the show just to be with Truman again. And I think that his best friend, and he's a fascinating character, who's this vendor machine maintenance man who's been friends with him since childhood. I do genuinely think that he considers their friendship real, even though ultimately he is working for the TV company and doing their bidding.
He is playing a part, but he also... Well, it's impossible to pretend to be someone's friend for that long without developing some kind of, for lack of a better term, bond with them. But, I mean, people are sentimental creatures. We don't like to remain detached. Eventually, we're going to catch some sort of feeling.
Yeah, I think that he genuinely did consider their friendship real, and part of the reason why maybe he was working so forcefully to keep him there for the TV company was because he didn't want to lose his friend.
Yeah, that was my reading on it too.
I think that's fairly unambiguous, because the one thing that they use to really try and anchor him there is their friendship.
Yeah.
And I don't get that impression from his wife, actually. I get the feeling that his wife doesn't really care that much for Truman at all.
No, I don't think so either.
She's particularly bad with the gaslighting. She is just doing her job.
She falls right the hell apart when when the cat comes out of the bag.
Yeah, she doesn't even try to console him. She's just saying, "Oh, you're having a nervous breakdown," and all of that. Whereas obviously she knows he's too close to the truth. And it's hard to say about his mother, actually. It's a character we don't see that often, but she gaslights him a lot, which I remember that was the time when he said, "Oh, that really made me mad."
Yeah.
I don't know about her, actually. It's hard to say.
I don't think it really makes a difference to her. Like, whether she's developed a motherly attachment to Truman or not, what she's got to do is the same.
This is going to sound really silly, and I hope it doesn't detract from how serious and good this movie is, but that mother character, maybe it was just her speech and her mannerisms, reminded me a lot of the mother character from The Room. Oh, Truman, you can't be serious about that. I had my blood tests, and I definitely have breast cancer.
Never mention it again.
No.
Yeah.
There's a few red herrings like that in this movie, not many. Sort of like the whole dad returning plot towards the end, where the showrunners do allow him to return as sort of a final last-ditch attempt to anchor him to the Truman Show world. But I don't think we need to. We had this discussion while we were watching it.
One interesting thing I want to bring up is how popular this show is. And the way they describe it at the beginning, they say sometimes people just leave him on all night for comfort. And
that would happen.
Yeah, that strikes me as something we would do, especially now in the YouTube/Twitch stream age of there always being someone who you probably like that produces content that you can put on. I mean, I stick playlists on YouTube to fall asleep to. So
yeah. I mean, Truman was very much the Pokemon of his time.
That's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see what this movie would be like if it was made today. I think it would be very much about the whole streamer sort of aesthetic.
Yeah, but how do you do that without alerting the person?
Good point. I think it would be more enclosed, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we're talking about this with our COVID-19 heads on, but life generally is more enclosed now than it would have been in the Truman Show days.
Yeah.
But yeah, this movie about a man who's trapped in the world's largest object, which is a giant dome in the middle of Los Angeles, designed to have a TV show, is the most realistic movie I've seen in a long time.
It's weird.
It's not realistic scientifically, because I don't think even with today's technology you could do half of this or make a dome anywhere near that big. I don't think it's structurally scientifically possible. However, this is what would happen if it happened, and in terms of human behaviour, it's an extremely realistic movie, I think.
Yeah, I would say so. I really do like when he finally gets to the end and he runs into the side of the dome. It's just a shitty little matte painting.
Yes! And we can tell because you can sort of look at the sky and see that something's different. And of course, the very first thing in the movie that alerts us to what this world is when I think it was Sirius, was the star, dropped out of the sky and it was just a flashlight.
Yeah.
I liked that. And how they immediately come up with a story. Oh, a plane flew over and accidentally dropped its load. And that is heard on the radio. Everything is made up on the spot, and it's quite genius because sometimes it's convincing and sometimes it's reaching. It's sort of like when you watched Dragon Ball Z and you had Mr. Satan say, "Oh no, they're using lightning effects to make it look like they're fighting." Exactly. The daft excuses he would come up to try and lampshade this fight between people with superpowers, for lack of a better word.
That bit where he accidentally tunes into the cast
police
radio.
Frequency. Oh, no.
Where,
did he?
Well, I don't know if it was... I assumed it was the radio network for the cast so that they would always know where he was.
No, I thought... Oh, yes, where they were saying now he's turning onto this road, yes.
Yeah. And the radio announcer says, you must have... we just got mixed up with a police radio there. It can sometimes happen.
Yeah, I think we've established that we did enjoy this movie and the reasons why we did.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you the next question. How well did the film achieve its goals, and what were they? We've sort of already started this discussion, haven't we?
Yeah, I think it's a very good example of what it's trying to be. So yes, I think it achieved its goals quite well, and they were, in a sense, it asks some questions about the nature of, for lack of a better term,
Humanity?
I don't know about humanity, but of agency.
Yes,
Because
and freedom.
technically no one's telling Truman what to do. He is no freer for that.
Exactly, he's being guided away from his own path.
And it did leave me wondering what he was going to do afterwards, but he's a worldwide celebrity in the outside world. People would help him out.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that, actually, because I am very glad that there isn't a sequel of this movie, and I hope they never make one.
They'll probably remake it at some point.
Oh, please, no. No, they did it perfectly the first time. I just hope they never make a sequel about what he does afterwards or what happens afterwards, because we don't need to know. It's best left to the imagination. And we live in a world where they're making Chicken Run 2, because apparently people were crying out for that.
Yeah,
I'm not going to complain, I'll probably watch it, but why?
I have no idea.
I don't think this was based on a book, which is a rarity, actually.
Yeah. It's one of those concepts that's, what if this, but too much, and in this case it was TV.
It's one of those conversations you'll have with a friend, like, oh, what if this is all a TV show?
Yeah, sort of like a proto-Black Mirror.
Yes, it is actually, that's a good way of putting it. But you can tell they sat down and thought all of this through, every little aspect, because...
I wonder how many writing passes this went through, because it's quite well done.
It's flush. It's very flush. I've not read the script, obviously. I've seen the movie. It's very flush. There's not anything that feels superfluous. There's not anything that feels a bit odd or unexplained or out of place.
Well, I think they skip over a lot of his life, like his wife leaving, his dad coming back. That just never goes anywhere in the film. But then it's not the point. That's not important to us, the audience of the film. It's important to the in-film audience of the TV show.
Yes.
And presumably they saw it.
As the true nature of the world becomes more and more apparent to Truman, these things become far less important anyway.
Yeah, well, they
So
would.
they're far less important to him, they're far less important to us.
Yeah.
The whole dad thing was just a cheap attempt to keep him in the world. The wife thing was explained by her, obviously having had enough of the role and needing to be written out.
And the nervous breakdown, in air quotes, was probably what led to that. The efforts that they go to keep him there.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand that there's a lot of sunk cost in that giant studio, and you can't exactly just recast him. But once the cat's out of the bag, what's the point?
Yeah, I agree. And it becomes apparent to everybody what's going to happen about halfway through.
Yeah.
It's one of those fait accompli? Is that how you pronounce it?
Fait accompli, I think.
Accompli, I don't know. I skipped Latin at school, to be honest with you, Ollie.
Yeah. Well, that's how I always heard it. Not that I've heard it a lot. But,
no, I see it written a lot, but very rarely spoken. So, there you go.
Yeah, but he's already got a hold of the thread at this point, and he's going to keep pulling it, even if you... And if you try to stop him, he's just going to do it when you're not around. As he does.
There's more to it, actually, because you do see the TV executives at one point in the movie. Actually, I made a note about this, because I remember one of them looked remarkably like somebody. I'm just looking through my notes now, forgive me.
The one in the bathtub you said looked like Ian McShane, I remember.
Yes, yeah, I'm not talking about him, though. I'm talking about the...
And I asked that because the point of the Truman Show, the whole appeal of the show, is that he doesn't know it is one. So at the end, when he's trying to convince him to stay, like, that's already gone. Even if he agreed to stay, he'd still know it was all a show.
Well, what's interesting about that is you do see the TV executives about 20 minutes before, and they walk in and tell them to switch it off, and they know it's over. They know the jig is up. But the showrunner, Christof, is the one who keeps everything going. And
Yeah.
he's the only one who's trying to convince Truman to stay at the end. And I think the reason why is because he genuinely believes that he cares for Truman. Sort of like a father, because you see him sort of caressing the screen wherever Truman is on, and saying, "I remembered your first steps. I remember when you lost your tooth. You're like I'm like a father to you. Be a son to me."
That's a really scary example of a parasocial relationship.
It is, but in his head, he believes that he's doing all this out of love, and as soon as Truman leaves, his son's gone to him.
Yeah.
So that's why he's so desperate to keep him, to the point where he'd rather him be dead than free when he makes them up the waves. Because everyone else in the room is saying, no, this is out of order, we can't do this. Although I don't know what kind of power Christof has over them to the point where they can't just wheel him off and then stop the waves. I don't know.
I think they've just been working under him for so long that it doesn't occur to them. Because this is like 30 years of a project.
It's a George Lucas situation where they think, well, he's a genius, he obviously knows what he's doing, I'm not going to speak up and say this is a bit daft. Not that I'm comparing Christof from the movie The Truman Show to George Lucas.
I think we've just outed your opinion on the prequels there.
I like the prequels. I like them. They're just daft movies. They're completely bonkers.
We may or may not cover one of those or more.
No. Ollie, I think there was a redemption arc in this movie.
Really?
I know what you're thinking. And it's not who you think. I think the audience of The Truman Show have a redemption arc.
No, I do actually see what you mean.
Because at the beginning, they're all watching out of a morbid curiosity, sort of because of the spectacle. I suppose you could say, like, people pointing and laughing at the zoo or whatever. I don't know.
And eventually they're genuinely rooting for him to escape, even though that means their favourite show is over. And when he finally, leaves, everyone erupts in cheering.
They'll give up their show just to see their boy Truman free.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good ending to a show, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it would be very easy to make the audience the villains of this. And you could argue that they are in a way, because if there wasn't demand for this show, they'd have stopped making it.
Yeah.
And they are sort of guilty for keeping this going for so long because they keep tuning in to watch it. However, that doesn't preclude them for caring about Truman.
No, that is true.
And funnily enough, even the main villain of the story cares about Truman in his own sick way.
Yeah.
So I guess the moral of the story is that love and caring and empathy doesn't necessarily make you a good person or a bad person.
Well, it's toxic relationships, isn't it?
Exactly. I mean, even the worst people in history have been capable of some kind of love.
Yeah.
Which is sort of why characters like Voldemort are so cartoonish and ridiculous and hard to really empathise with.
Well, we're not quite at Harry Potter yet this month.
No. But you see what I'm getting at, don't you? Christof is a far more interesting character than Voldemort. Not that we're comparing the two, or that's any kind of reliable barometer of quality.
The presence of love doesn't necessarily make you a good person, and not all love is healthy, I think is what you're getting at, isn't it?
Yeah, you said it a little bit better than me. Which is probably why I have you on, actually, come to think of it.
Glad to be of service.
Yeah, you did your part, Ollie.
One is glad to be of service.
Ooh, nice. Next question. Did the movie exceed your expectations?
It did.
Yeah.
I mean, I remembered the ending, and I remembered the concept, and basically most of the drama because I started watching from when it started. But I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did. I mean, I thought it would be a perfectly fine movie. But I really like it. I'd watch that again.
Yeah, it's one of... whereas for me, it's one of my favourite movies of all time. I've seen it many times. It gets better with every watch.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I watched the beginning part of it before we started recording, and seeing the actors talk about the show knowing the characters that they play and how involved they are in Truman's life, it casts it in a whole new light for me.
Yeah, well, anybody could read the synopsis of the movie and understand the premise, so I'm glad they didn't try to keep it a mystery from the audience and leaned into it from the beginning.
Yeah, and his wife particularly says that she sees it as a noble pursuit. She says her life is the Truman Show, it's a lifestyle, and she calls it noble. And I find that really weird, but also it doesn't surprise me at all that someone that involved would need to believe that.
Exactly, because how else do you justify marrying somebody you don't really love just for a high-paid job?
Yeah, and, well, enabling the doing of what they were doing to him.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I mean, they manufactured a crippling fear of water just to keep him from leaving, and put him through the trauma of losing his dad to facilitate that.
And while all of that happened before the wife character probably was even involved in the show, everybody is still guilty to some extent. The only two people who are innocent in the whole thing are Truman and Natasha McElhone.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're just taking a job as an extra, you're only innocent for so long.
Oh yeah, you're complicit, aren't you?
Well, I see what you mean about the audience being kind of passive villains there.
Yeah, but they sort of have their redemption because they do support him in the end in a way that the people who are making the show don't. I was going to say can't, but don't is a better word because they still have a choice in the matter.
Yeah, I mean, if they all refused to do their jobs, then there would be no show. But
Exactly.
I'm sure, after Truman gets out, those same audience members will help him into a new life.
Oh yeah, and there's one thing that we forget about in a way. This is a Jim Carrey movie.
I didn't forget that.
Well, no.
It's very Jim Carrey.
Yes, but what I'm trying to say is that at this point, Jim Carrey was mostly known for comedic roles. And it's not that this movie isn't funny, it's more of a drama than a comedy, and the humour isn't necessarily laugh out loud funny.
Most of what humour there is does come from Jim Carrey, though, and his mannerisms.
Yes, it's hard not to empathise with him because he's instantly likeable in everything
I'm
he's
actually
in.
glad you said it's a Jim Carrey movie. I cannot imagine anyone else playing that role.
Neither can I. It just wouldn't feel anywhere near as good with anyone else in the role. I don't know who could do it, to be honest with you. It's a bit like...
I'm glad they went with Jim Carrey.
Yeah, it's very much like Jim Carrey's Bicentennial Man, except this was more of a hit than a miss in this case.
Do we have a type of movie on this channel?
I think we do. It's anything to do with orangutans, anything to do with odd science fiction concepts.
And the nature of humanity and freedom.
We should watch Planet of the Apes. It combines all of those factors.
Is there one that's in our time window, then?
Yeah, there's the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes. Remember where he lands at the end? And then you see the Lincoln Memorial, but Lincoln is a chimp. Because apparently the chimps were around for the American Civil War. I don't know.
No, the Lincoln is the specific chimp that he just killed.
He killed the Lincoln chimp. Oh my god, John Wilkes Booth was a time-travelling astronaut. Confirmed. He killed them. Did he say the whole Latin Tyrannus thing, or...?
No, there was a little plaque. I only saw that movie, as a child, but I remember seeing the statue of the ape, and it said, "The memory of General Fade is enshrined forever." So that is
the dumbest idea! Carry on.
I don't know why I remember that, of all things, and then the police monkeys come.
The police monkeys!
Sorry, police apes.
I know, it makes sense in the context of that world, but when you just say police monkeys, you can't help but have a funny image in your head. That
world has no context for existing, though. There's no explanation as to how that happened.
It's just for a shock twist ending, isn't it?
We've gone off on a tangent again.
Do you know what? It would be like if there was an extra scene at the end of the Truman Show where he walks through the black door into the outside world and everybody is an ape.
Nice save.
And then you see all the actors from the Truman Show outside and they all take off their face masks and they were all apes all along.
Yeah.
Imagine that! That'd be so out of the blue. Oh dear. This took a turn.
Okay, well, let's save that for when or if we ever cover that movie.
Yeah, not only did this movie exceed my expectations, it exceeds my expectations every time I watch it.
I think that's a fair assessment. I'm probably going to watch it again.
Yeah, please do. Question 4. Is there an element in the film...
Oh, just before you do, how did it do financially? We normally ask that.
Okay, let me find out for you. I think it did very well, but I don't remember the figures. Ollie, this movie only cost $60 million to make.
That is actually surprising.
That's remarkable, considering the production value of this film.
Yeah, but also not so much because, by design, it's meant to look quite grounded and realistic, but also just a little bit off.
Yes, and it's that little bit off that you think would cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
Because there is that one bit where you do see the dome from the outside, but it's not meant to look the most realistic because it is in the context of this being a promo for the actual Truman Show. So it could just be something that they made. It looks like something from a TV show. And I think that's okay. I don't think that's cheap at all. None of the effects in this movie look dated, which is remarkable, really.
It is.
Considering that it had a lower budget than, say, Bicentennial Man. Here's a big part. Do you know how much this movie made at the box office?
How much?
$264.1 million.
Oh, good.
So that is stonks. That's film stonks.
Film stonks. I know, I'm happy it did well. I think it deserved to.
Yes, and it was directed by Peter Weir, who made the Dead Poets Society. So again, the Robin Williams connection, and you sort of feel that because they're similar movies in the terms of the way they feel.
I've not actually seen Dead Poets Society.
I've seen it once, I don't remember it particularly well. If it was within our time period, I'd say watch it, but it's 1989.
Oh,
Bloody hell, why couldn't they hold off? Yeah, why couldn't they hold off?
Wait for a couple of months so that in 2020, a couple of guys on YouTube can, talk about your movie. What's YouTube? You'll see.
People should consider those who haven't even been born yet. Okay, question 4, Ollie.
Yeah.
Is there an element in the film that particularly appeals?
I'm not sure. I mean, I doubt the premise would grab me in a trailer, but I like Jim Carrey, so I probably would have gone to see it for him.
Or any time, indeed.
Or any time, indeed. I mean, especially before Liar Liar sort of ruined him for me. I'll probably explain what I mean by that. I actually quite like the film Liar Liar, but so did everyone at my school. And we used to do this thing where people would bring videos of their favourite movies in and we'd pick which scene to show, and the class that chose the winning scene got a prize. And someone always brought in Liar Liar, and it was always the pen scene, and it won every time, and I got so sick of seeing it.
Maybe it's just because I've seen that scene more times than I care to admit, but I don't even think that's even close to being the funniest scene in that movie.
No. I mean, any time he's in the court is funnier to me.
Yeah. What's up? Your cholesterol! Yeah, any scene in the course is much funnier. I agree with you there.
Yeah.
Is there an element of the film that particularly appeals? Yes. Natasha McElhone, definitely. Oh my god, yes. I mean, yeah. But, okay, beyond that, let's see. The cinematography.
Yeah, the cinematography is brilliant.
It's just the small things like the camera in the back of the chocolate machine.
And there's also, like, at any point you could be looking out of a hidden camera, like that one in the car.
Yeah. Yeah, from the radio, yes, that's an iconic scene.
Yeah. There's a lot of commitment to the conceit here.
The world building, I'd have to say.
Yeah, it's all really well done. None of it feels expressly exposited to you.
Yeah, they don't go overboard with the exposition. We know very little about the outside world.
Or at least when it does, it's supposed to be.
In fact, we probably know about as much about the outside world as Truman does, funnily enough.
Yeah.
Because we see very little of it. All we see is the audience reacting.
Yeah. So we basically assume that the outside world from the Truman Show is our own world.
Except they can build really small cameras and they can build giant domes. Those are the only two differences.
Yeah.
Also, the legal system being extremely dystopian to the point where a TV company can own a child.
Well, can legally adopt a child. Once Truman reached the age of 18, I think he would have been legally responsible for himself. Not that he would have known that. Like, at that point, it is essentially slavery.
Yeah, I mean, they were under no legal obligation to tell him he's free.
Yeah.
Is that as bad as slavery? It's interesting. Interesting philosophical
That is
debate.
also an interesting question.
Yes, this is a very philosophical movie. It doesn't make the audience burden themselves too much by having to think about it all the time.
But you could if you chose to.
Exactly. You can take as much out of this movie as you want to. I mean, you could really go into this movie just going, aha, very good Jim Carrey performance, lol. But you could come out of this movie saying, is it right what they're doing? Is it wrong what they're doing?
Well, it's obviously wrong.
No, I mean, people in general, like, you could even say Truman's actions. Like, could he have found a more conciliatory way to end things? I don't know.
I kind of think once you try to kill him with a storm, all bets are
off. Yeah, I mean...
Also, when you deliberately put him through the trauma of losing his dad and give him a fear of water to keep him there, like, that kind of forfeits any moral high ground you might have had claim to.
No, yeah, exactly. I just like this movie really conveys the emotion of desperation quite well.
Yeah. I mean, especially with that scene where his wife holds the knife thing to him.
Yeah.
Because she knows what's happening, she knows the jig is up, but,
And he's desperate for answers, he's desperate for the truth and to be able to escape.
And she's desperate to stop him from getting there.
And Christof is desperate to stop him at all costs, to the point where they fake a forest fire, they fake a nuclear meltdown, which is the most ridiculously farcical thing.
But, again, Truman has never grown up outside this world. This could be normal to him. He could have no frame of reference for anything different.
Well, performances I liked in this movie are often the small ones, actually. I've talked about his best friend, who I think is probably one of the best performances in the whole movie, just because of how much it answers, but also how many questions it leaves about his motivation.
One thing I do like about this film, I've got to say, is the stuff that, upon first watching it, felt like something sloppy happening, upon further thought actually makes sense. Like when the policeman says, "No problem, Truman," and that's what sets him off. That felt a bit on the nose to me, but then also, have you ever tried to work in a group?
Go on.
Like, well, the more people you're working with on a group project, the more likely mistakes are to happen, and that's a lot of people.
Well, yeah, and people do slip up in small ways. That would happen in real life.
Coming from a performance background, it's difficult enough to get 4 people to do everything you need them to. Never mind a good 4,000.
Well, here's a question that we might actually introduce in future. See what you think. I don't like making stuff up on the fly, but if I were to do that film festival idea that we had where we pick one scene of this movie to show, do you know what scene I'd pick?
What scene?
And you're never going to guess.
I'm not going to try to, tell me.
Good, because you'll fail. The bit where Truman gets on the bus. It seems like a mundane scene to pick, but a bunch of things happen when he gets on the bus. Everyone looks at him.
Yeah, I like how the bus driver does seem genuinely apologetic that he's doing that.
Yes, I was going to come to that. Everyone's eyes are on him. The little girl says, "Oh, my mom, is that Truman?" And then the bus driver and the conductor guy sort of look at each other like, "What the fuck are we going to do?" And then the driver deliberately sabotages the bus, and he does look genuinely remorseful and sorry that he has to do that to Truman. I don't know if it's intentional, but I felt a shred of empathy.
I think it is.
Yeah, and maybe because we want it to be, but I feel like there was a shred of empathy in that. And I love movies where the small performances make it. Spider-Man movies, the Sam Raimi one's a good example of that, where all the small people, you genuinely feel them, and they all add something like, I mean, the Mr. Azizes and...
I quite like Mr. Ditkovich.
Yeah, Mr. Ditkovich, and then like his daughter, the people on the bridge saying, you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. You get the feeling that all of those people are as valuable and as warm as Peter Parker is.
The world feels lived in, I think, is a good way of summarising that.
It does, and if it didn't, I don't think this movie would have hit quite so well.
We don't actually know the point to which everyone is aware of what they're doing, because that kid that you mentioned, like, Mommy, is that Truman? How much could that kid possibly know about what's going on?
Well, it's the most famous show in the world, and obviously she'd know that she's working on it.
Yeah, but would she be aware of the ethical ramifications?
Well, no, but that's beside the point.
Yeah, the bus driver is clearly aware of the ethical ramifications and he hates that he's doing it.
Well, he's a grown-up and he probably just got the job for the sake of, well, needing a job, and he was never one of those people who was meant to really interact with Truman.
Yeah.
It's sort of like where he goes into the building next door to where he works, Truman, when he becomes suspicious, which is probably a place that they'd never have any cause to put a whole load of effort into.
It's like working for a company that you know does bad things, but none of those bad things have anything to do with you.
Yeah.
So you sort of make peace with it on those grounds, but then he's confronted by the thing that he's got to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good way of putting it, because you're going to make a living at the end of the day. There's mouths to feed. I don't really blame the bus driver, to be honest with you, and I did love that performance. It was a very small performance in this movie.
Yeah, it was a good one, though.
Yeah, I mean, same with Natasha McElhone. She was fantastic in this movie. I wouldn't call her a minor performance, because she was an important aspect of the plot and an important motivation for Truman.
That was what's her name, wasn't it? I can't remember the name. What was the name of the character she played?
Oh, I made a note of it earlier. It was Sylvia Garland.
Yeah, Sylvia. She had another name on the show. Yeah, I liked her performance and her whole... She was the moral anchor, I suppose.
She was the Morpheus... Yeah, she was the Morpheus Red Pill character of this movie, because she was the one who sets Truman onto the fact that something was up and that his life was being controlled.
Yeah. And, well, when she was being dragged away, she expressly told him.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell how much of it he got, because she was shouting very quickly and someone else was speaking very loudly over her.
He was confused, he didn't quite know what was happening.
Yeah, so he heard enough to set him on to something not being right, but not quite enough to make him realise there and then what was going on. And again, they came up with more stories and excuses on the spot.
Yeah, we're moving to Fiji. And that's his obsession with Fiji. He wants to go to Fiji to find her. And also because there are unexplored islands that he wants to explore.
Which, I looked up, is an actual scientific fact. Although there is one scientific fact that they get wrong in the Truman Show.
What's that?
The Great Wall of China isn't the only man-made object that can be seen from space, and it can only really be seen from low Earth orbit in quite poor detail, and that's only the well-maintained parts of the Great Wall of China. A lot of man-made objects, like the pyramids, can be seen from space. But again, it depends on what you mean by space. You can see a lot of these things very well from the International Space Station.
Yeah.
But not necessarily, say, from high Earth orbit or the Moon, without the aid of telescopic technology.
Right, so, what question were we on?
Is there an element of the film that particularly appeals?
I think we've gone over that pretty well.
Yeah. Okay. Question 5. How does the film hold up today?
I think it holds up pretty well, yeah.
Same here. I think it's as good today as it was then, and if I were a teacher, I'd be showing this movie in schools.
Yeah. I think there's probably a few anachronisms, like phones, basically.
Yeah, it would be impossible.
Well, they're not even anachronisms because the film was made in the 90s, but they're anachronisms to us.
Yeah, But I think they'd have to do away with smartphones if they were doing it today anyway, because otherwise it would be too easy to find out what's really going on.
Yeah.
I think they would have to freeze it in a... I think there's sort of a 50s aesthetic to it a little bit.
Was there even an internet in the Truman Show?
No, and it's obvious why they can't... Well, there's computers that he works on, but they probably have their own in-house sort of LAN. Is that the term? I don't know. I'm not a computer person.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Oh, that annoys me. I wear glasses, and I have done since a young age. So growing up, people always assumed I knew a lot about computers. And I have an average knowledge of computers. So they're like, oh, well, what about this mother drive? How can I fix this? How? And it's like, I don't know anything beyond lol email, lol memes. Just don't ask. I can probably... give you some advice on flight simulators and hardware for that, but beyond that, just don't ask. I'm not as clever as I look. I'm honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, the film holds up very well today. It looks good as well.
It does.
None of it looks dated. It's not like Holes, where it's a great-looking movie except for the lizards.
There are no yellow-spotted lizards in the Truman Show.
No, although that would have been another good way to fence him in.
But nothing
looks out of place.
No, that's true. So yeah, that's that one. And so...
Last question, and I think it's an easy one. Was the film received appropriately at the time?
I think so, yes. We've just gone over how much... Well, not just, but we've already gone over how successful the film was at the box office. Especially considering how relatively inexpensive it was to make for a big budget film.
The score's good in this because they use a lot of tunes and songs that you'll know, as well as what sounds like typical drama movie scores. But if you look carefully, they all come from this man playing the piano in the studio.
Yeah.
So even that's a meta reference.
Yeah, I did like that.
It's a small detail that you can miss out on. And also, what I find quite funny, this is one thing that has dated, and it was only for like 1 second, but if you look at the computers that they're using to manage the artificial weather systems and everything like that, they're running on Windows 95. I think that's hilarious.
I never noticed
doing all this advanced technology. Yeah, they're doing all this advanced technology that we don't even have today, and they're using like Windows 95 fonts, and it looks like something that you could knock up on PowerPoint. It's great.
Yeah.
But I like how they use things like lightning, because there's foreshadowing in this movie. For example, when he's at the travel agency, another small detail I like about the travel agency scene is the woman who walks in to assist him has paper around her neck from where she was being made up, and she quickly just gets rid of it.
Yeah.
But also the poster of the plane with lightning strike it saying, "It could happen to you." This would never be in a real-life travel agency.
No, they want to sell you on air travel.
Exactly.
Not put you off.
Even the air travel agency, and I like how she had to be made up, because obviously why would he ever go there? It's just there just in case and to fill out the world a bit. I like how, despite that, they still go to the effort of doing that, even though they overlook small things like the wife crossing her fingers. Again, why didn't she just use her other hand and hide it from the camera? Do you have to use your left hand for that?
Well, perhaps she didn't know the camera was there. I don't know what the implications of it were.
It was obviously a slip-up, but...
that kind of... It could have just slipped through the cracks, like the rainbow coin in Donkey Kong 64.
Yeah!
There's a collectible in a game from 1998, I think, that nobody found for 20 years.
That's remarkable. There's probably so many small details and Easter eggs in this movie that you could pore over that we're just not aware of, and maybe very few people are.
Maybe.
I mean, I think there's only about 10 people in the world who have the time to obsessively study it to understand how good this movie is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, we've probably scratched the surface of all the small details. Almost said all the small things, but I don't want anyone to think of Blink-182.
Well, now they definitely will. Well done. I don't know what your beef with Blink-182 is. I have no opinion on them one way or the other, but now they will definitely be thought of.
Neither do I, actually. They're not like So Solid Crew, where we have a life or death vendetta against each other for no reason. Okay. It's just small things like the lady walking past the flowers, the beetle, and I like how when they're looking for Truman and they're all sort of linking arms, they return to their original positions and just stand there. It's a great shot to show us, at least, how false the world is.
Yeah.
Because all this stuff that they do to make it more professional somehow is also more revealing. Like, Truman does notice the patterns in the world and that it shouldn't be like that.
How was it received by critics?
Good question there. I think they liked it. I'm going to look on Rotten Tomatoes. Do you want to know, Ollie?
Yeah, tell me.
Okay. I think you're not going to be surprised, but 95% by critics.
Cool. I'm glad.
I agree. It genuinely is that good. Like I said, it's probably in my top 5 movies. Maybe that's a video we could do, actually. We could do one of those each.
Top 5 movies. Oh, God, there are so many, though.
Yeah, well, we've got time to think about it. To quote Louis Armstrong, we have all the time in the world. Audience score, 89%.
Yeah, I think the film was received appropriately at the time.
Yeah, I'd put it around 89 to 95% myself. It says a funny, tender and thought-provoking film, yes. The Truman Show is all the more noteworthy for its remarkable, prescient vision of runaway celebrity culture and a nation with insatiable thirst for the private details of ordinary lives. There is something in that. People do love to know people's details.
Yeah, I know. I never got that, but I am aware of the phenomenon.
And it's like those magazines, like Closer magazines, talk about like Posh's, home life and stuff like that. I don't care, but apparently a lot of people do.
I don't know. This celebrity cheated on this other celebrity with this other celebrity.
Yeah. Oh, have you heard the latest about David Beckham? That kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I haven't. Nor do I wish to. Please leave me alone. Strange person who I don't know.
I think this movie was received appropriately at the time, and I hope it's received as well today. Because it is readily available on streaming services. We watch this on Netflix in the UK. I don't know what the situation is abroad with availability of the Truman Show.
You can never tell with Netflix, can you?
No, it's weird what's available in different places. I mean, for example, like Brazil has all of Dragon Ball Z. We don't. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But regardless, it's not a hard movie to find. Just, if you haven't seen this, I don't know why you've been watching this in the last hour, but do yourself a favour, watch this movie. It's so good.
Yeah.
Or if you have seen it and you haven't seen it in a while, watch it again.
It is definitely worth a rewatch.
Yeah, it's a classic. It's a good timer. Alright, thank you very much for watching this week's Film du Siècle.
Yeah, and we will see you next week.
Yeah, next week for a movie that neither of us have watched, which I think is a first for this channel.
Yep.
So, next week, get ready for Sisterhood of the Travelling Pants. And if you're not American, then we're talking about the American meaning of pants. It's not about, like, magic underwear.
Although I would watch that movie.
It's not Thunderpants, we'll put it that way. Okay, we will see you next week.
See you next week.
Goodbye.